Hey, 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 we are live in the studio. This is Girls Share Your Story. And if you have been watching us for the last couple of weeks, you know what we're all about. We're all about giving authors the opportunity to connect with people just like you who absolutely need a dose of inspiration and an ounce of encouragement. Let's face it, all of us have gone through something traumatic in our lives, and it always helps when we know that there is a sister who reminds us, hey, sis, you are not alone. And so I am excited that today is much like any other day, except we have a very, very, very special guest who is joining us from her studio. Her name is Nikki. And Nikki is a recent friend of mine who has gone to do some amazing things in her life. But as you're coming on this live stream, I want you to be engaged and also give some virtual hand claps and hugs to remind Nikki that she is not alone. This conversation is a very interactive one, and so, but it will be emotional at times. And so I want to make sure that she remembers that she's in a circle of love and that you guys are absolutely supporting her, and you want to hear from her. So feel free to ask your questions. And as you come on, remember to share this video so that more people who need to hear the message will hear it. And so with that, I am going to open the floor up and invite my special guest into the studio. Hi, Nikki. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm well. I'm actually well. I was just telling Nikki before we got on live that I put the babies to bed. So once they're asleep and not asking for food, then life is just very, very sweet.
Because it seems like you get your me time.
Yeah, you gotta get your me time. And Nikki, I know you can relate to that more than anyone because you have what, 3 boys?
3 boys, yes. So I always looked forward to me o'clock. It's me o'clock right now. Go to bed.
I love it. Me o'clock. I love that. I'll have to use that one. So right now it's us o'clock, and we are gonna dive right into just your message. Tell us a little bit about your background, Nikki, and what makes you a bold, a brilliant Black woman.
Well, I grew up in San Francisco, California. I grew up the youngest of 4 girls. I grew up in a impoverished neighborhood. We didn't have much, but I was a part of a strong family. My mom was a strong woman. She was able to basically take care of us 4 girls all on her own. It didn't come without, bumps along the way. And so I went through life learning a lot of hard lessons in growing up and in trying to figure my way. And so growing up without having a lot, I sort of had a lot of insecurities. I didn't feel like I was good enough. I never felt pretty enough. I never felt like I was at the same level as other young ladies who had more. So I struggled in my childhood, and as I grew into an adolescent and into my teenage years and even beyond, with loving myself enough. And so
let's put a little pin right there, because you just really gave us some interesting content, because you, on the outside, you look at Nikki and you're like, oh my gosh, she's so beautiful and she has her life together, her makeup's on point, like she's winning. But the truth is that your outside doesn't necessarily reflect what's happening on the inside. And I think that's important for us to really pay attention to, because especially when we look at the media and even our own personal social media pages, we see people expressing living the life and things are happy, but then we really don't know the depression that's happening on the background, the abuse that may be happening. You don't really understand a person's story. Like when we saw Chadwick, who just passed away, God rest his soul, people were making fun of him a couple of months ago when he posted a video on his Instagram page, and they didn't know that he was dying, actually, not battling anything. He was in the process of dying. And people had everything negative to say. And so I want us to really remember that it's not what is on the outside that counts. It's really what's happening on the inside that matters. And so tell us about that journey for you. How did you come from a place of being discontent with your emotions? And really, how did you go through that journey? Was it all of a sudden you just had this awakening like, oh, I'm valuable? Tell us a little bit more about that journey.
Yes. So I'm glad you asked that because the short end of the answer is yes, there is a sort of awakening that happens. It's sort of like an epiphany almost. But it happens after you get to a certain point. So you have to go through certain things before you reach that point. And for me, that breaking point was the ending of my 14-year marriage. I was married for 14 years. We were together for 2 years prior to. So it was a 16-year relationship that I had been in since I was a young 20-something-year-old. And so it was pretty much my entire fully grown adult life that I was in that relationship. And so throughout that relationship, I experienced, a lot of different drama-filled experiences. But what happened at the end is when I
wait, don't take us to the end yet. We don't want to see you on your mountain just yet. We want to know a little bit more about your hell before you share your hallelujah. So let's go back. And the reason why I say that is because, the whole idea of Girl Share Your Story is really for us to remind ourselves that nobody is perfect. We are imperfect beings on a journey together. And so when we share our story, it's not to maximize the pain, not at all, because it was painful, the things that we've gone through. But what it is to remind us of the promise. And I know that you are powerful in your own way, but I want to know, what were those moments where you felt less powerful? So you grow up, you have the affection of your mom, the attention of your sisters, but you go through this journey where you're not feeling like you really matter. And then you enter into this relationship that ended up being a marriage. Did your internal chatter become maximized in that relationship, or was it a pleasant relationship? We don't know. Let us know.
Okay, so let me go back a little bit further then, because I need to my initial introduction into being in a relationship was the worst relationship I have ever been in. So this was as a teenager. And as you mentioned, how women, a lot of times we can smile on the outside. We look like everything is together on the outside, but we're slowly dying on the inside, or we're miserable on the inside, or we're feeling tortured. So my first introduction to a relationship was a relationship of torment. It didn't begin that way. And it was sort of the first love, relationship, teenage love. And it began super pleasant. And I'm sure many women can relate to, in the beginning stages, he's a perfect guy. He's, sweet and kind. And at that point, most of the time, they're just giving you their representative. Well, yeah. So, in this particular situation for me, at that age, I'm still learning to love who I am. At that age, I'm still learning to accept, who I am, my flaws, the things I do have, the things I don't have, my looks, my body. All of that is something that you are extremely sensitive about during that age. And so that relationship really did a bit of damage to my self-esteem early on. And so just to go into that relationship, that was an abusive relationship, both physically and emotionally. And so that relationship caused me to second guess myself, caused me to feel like I wasn't, good enough, that I couldn't keep a man happy, and, that I didn't have what it took to be, this ride or die girlfriend. And, it was just a lot of different things and a lot of pressure put on me. I wasn't affectionate enough. That was one of the biggest things that I was always told. You're not loving enough. You're not, you don't put me on a pedestal and things of that sort. And so
Now, was he the same age as you, expecting all of this?
he was a couple years older, but he wasn't that
Okay.
much older. He was only probably about 2 to 3 years older than me. And he was expecting all this, yes, at that age, but primarily due to the advice that the bad advice that he was getting from his older,
Right.
the guys in the neighborhood who all have that mentality. And so things changed. It didn't help that there was a mental illness that developed in him, and it went downhill even faster from there. So that is really what instituted a lot of insecurities within me, that first relationship that I carried with me throughout my relationships that I got into after that.
So sometimes, Nikki, women are genuinely looking for a person that loves them, who's affectionate, and who will lay down the red carpet for them. And they're doing everything that they think is right. But for some reason, they keep attracting the same type of guy with just a different name.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, my first question is, why is that? If you have the answer, I mean, that's a big question, but why is it that women seem to repeat that cycle?
In my opinion, I think that relates to something that's broken inside of you as well. There's something inside of you that you haven't dealt with or built up enough in order to keep those type of gentlemen from being attracted to you. So when I speak about loving yourself enough in every kind of way, when you reach that level where you are loving yourself at the highest capacity possible, those type of people will no longer be attracted to you. They, in my opinion, they will not even feel like they can touch you. They're not even on the same level as you. And so, yeah, a lot of times, you may think that you have picked someone of value, and then they turn out to be a dud. But there are times where sometimes if it's happening over and over and over again, there may be something inside of you that you need to work on building up more of.
Yeah, but you realize, from what I got from your experience, is that self-love will allow others to love you more effectively. Is that right?
That is, yes, absolutely.
So let us shout out, Rachel is joining us. We have so many people joining us from different groups. We have Sheila, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Hello, welcome, and make sure that you be a part of the conversation. And if you want Nikki to know that she's not alone, just type in the chat, you are not alone. You are not alone. Because sometimes when we are sharing our vulnerability, right, when we're exposing ourselves to the world, it can feel a little strange. We can feel a little isolated. So I want this is our girl chat. So let our girls know that you are feeling them and that you understand, because some of what they're sharing, you probably have gone through it, or someone that you are close to have experienced it as well. And so to that same question, there are people who have gone through that cycle that you experience, and sometimes they find out early that they need to love themselves first before anyone else can love them. But sometimes it happens a little later, and I think that was your experience. Tell us about that transition from one relationship to your marriage.
So that transition, me learning to love myself enough, did not happen, I had to go through some things. God has to take you through some things in order for you to fully grasp certain things. And so I went through a couple more relationships before I actually found my husband. And so we were married at a young age. I think I want to say 24 and 26. Is extremely young to get married, in my opinion, looking back at it now. But we got married young. We had a son. I already had a son from my previous relationship. And that relationship in my marriage, that was when I experienced the I don't know if you go to amusement parks or not, but if you go to an amusement park and you see the big kahuna, the most feared roller coaster in the park,
Mm-hmm.
what marriage was for me. It was the biggest roller coaster I had ever experienced in my life. And so there were so many ups and downs, turns, spins, upside downs. It was it was a very, very trying experience, but it was also an experience where I learned so much. I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about being in a relationship, being loved correctly, and loving correctly.
So
And
tell us a little bit more, because I'll tell you, for someone who may not have, who maybe there are people here, Nikki, who are watching, who are now just finding, who are now on their journey to wanting to be in love and like have that one person. They've lived their adult life, just, I'm just casual, I'm a corporate woman and I'm just doing my thing, right? And now they're looking for, okay, who's going to be my lifetime partner? And you thought that this man would have been the partner that you had for the rest of your life. I mean, 16 years is quite an investment. So when you talk about the ups and the downs, did it happen suddenly? What were some of the things that you guys went through that caused this emotional and physical roller coaster for you?
Okay, so that's a very good question. Let me tell you the first thing I did, the first mistake that I made in my marriage. The very first mistake that I made with my marriage was not consulting God.
Y'all hear that? Y'all hear that? Not consulting God. Wow.
Because I wanted to be married. I wanted to have a family. I wanted to be a complete unit. I wanted, the fairy tale. I wanted that life so bad that I was going to get it by any means necessary. And instead of letting God lead the way, I led the way. And I knew I knew at a certain point that if I asked God, was this my husband, he was going to tell me no. I knew it back then.
Wow. When did you know? Was it in the beginning?
It was in the beginning. It was in the beginning. I had a very strong feeling that if I consulted God, he was going to tell me no. And you know how we get sometimes, we want what we want. So rather than being a confirmed no, I moved ahead. So that was the first thing that I knew. After that, the first year of the marriage was horrific. And they tell you the first year is the hardest. The first year is the hardest. Okay, hard is one thing, horrible is another. The first year of my marriage, there was infidelities on his part. He totally switched up. He was very much more dismissive and just didn't seem to love me like he used to. It was just a switcheroo. And so I was like, oh, wait a minute. Like, no, this is not what I signed up for. Initially, I wanted to be married so bad. We had a son. So I had two children at this point. And one of the things I did not want is to be a single parent. So especially my first son was by, a previous relationship. That was another fear. Just being totally transparent and honest with you. I didn't want to be a mother of two children by two fathers and not be in a relationship with either one. So I felt that pressure as well. I don't want to be a stereotype. I didn't want to be a failure. So this marriage had to work. That's how I felt. This marriage had to work. And so despite the things that we went through, that was always in the back of my mind. This marriage has to work.
Wow.
Yeah.
We got a question from Rachel. And those of you who are joining us, welcome. This is an interactive dialogue, so I want you to ask your questions. And by no means is any question out of pocket, unless Nikki says so. So Rachel asks, when did you realize some of those ups and downs weren't natural or okay? Great question.
That's a really good question. When did I notice that they weren't okay? I think that for one, the infidelity, I knew that wasn't okay. He had struggled with being faithful even before we got married. That's probably one of the reasons why I was afraid to ask God his blessing, because he would have told me, girl, So anyway, the infidelities were probably the biggest thing that showed me that this wasn't okay, because I truly, when I said my vows, I was saying my vows, in all honesty, with full intentions of adhering to them.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that he was doing the same. We had issues before getting married, but he always said, oh, but once I get married, I've always told myself, once I get married, that's it. Once I get married, I'm on a straight, so he really sold it in that way for me. So once there was an infidelity, that's when I knew that this was not natural or okay. But I still hung in there because, like I said, we have that innate desire, that longing to hold on, because you don't want to be a failure or for whatever reasons. And so when he gave me his excuses or his reasons, and he cried and begged and pleaded and all this stuff, it was what I really wanted to hear in order to keep things together. And that's what I dealt with. He messed up, and then he swore he would change, and and then we dealt with other issues, and then he would mess up again and swore he would change. But what I will say is that we did get to a good place. So after several years in the marriage, we did get to a place where I was no longer dealing with that issue anymore, as far as infidelity, as far as feeling like he didn't value me and things of that sort. So we did get to a place where I was able to trust him again. I was able to forgive him for the previous instances, and things were okay.
How did you get to that place? Was there counseling involved or some type of intervention?
There was several counselors involved throughout the years. There was church, God, pastor. I was a lot more active in church than he was. He would go, but he wasn't there. You know what I mean? He would go, but he wasn't really there. And so, but I really felt like, we pulled it together with the help of God, and with counseling sessions, and just not giving up, being committed, not giving up, and that did help us. That did help us get to a stable place in our marriage. And there was a time where there weren't any problems, any instances of infidelities or anything for like an 8-year period before things came crashing down.
Wow. So you're, first of all, you're entering into this relationship with past hurts, past experiences of abuse, and then your internal chatter saying that you don't matter, that you're inadequate, that you're not beautiful, and all these types of things compounding on what you're seeing on the outside, is that people are treating you the way that you feel on the inside. And so you move from that, you get into this relationship, he's showing the same signs, go through some stuff, and then there's this period of peace, almost like, this refuge that was carved out in your marriage, and you credit that from getting counseling, also going to church and being intentional about prayer. 8 years is a pretty long time for someone to send in their representative. So do you think that he genuinely changed Nikki, or was that just a show?
So here's what I truly believe. I truly believe that he had a void inside of him that he needed to address. There was something broken inside of him that was, established in his childhood and things he went through that caused something to be broken inside of him. So here's what I truly believe. Every time that he said sorry, I believe he believed it at the time. Every time he said he wouldn't do it again, I believe that he believed it. I still believe that he believed it at the time. The problem is that when you have something inside of you that's really deeply rooted in hurt and brokenness that you don't address, no matter how much you intend to be a certain way, if you don't address it, it's going to come up again, and it's going to keep on coming up, and it's going to eventually come up and ruin what you have going on. And so that's what I really, really believe, that he honestly had or has, a void inside of him, or a sort of brokenness inside of him due to the things that he's gone through that hasn't been addressed. And until that healing happens, he's very limited on, how he can progress. And so I believe that although we had that period, where it was all peace, and everything was all good, he wasn't healed on the inside. So yeah, so when there was an incident and an opportunity that presented itself, after, we had these years where nothing happened, and he indulged. And so,
wow. And before you go there, because I know that was like one of the life-changing moments for you, I want us to remember that, you cannot heal from what you refuse to address. Nikki said it.
True.
And it's not just this guy who has that issue. All of us have some issue that we are not healed from, whether it's the fact that, your mother walked out on the family and she just left you to fend for yourself, whether it's the fact that your father was never there. Like these underlying issues, those things that are part of your journey, those things impact and create the character that you are today.
Yes.
And it's not that, if you suppress it, then it won't ever come up again and you just leave the past in the past. Sometimes, more often than not, the past comes back to haunt you, and it'll come up in unexpected ways. I mean, I hear all the time, Nick, and you probably can attest to this. It's when folks get successful and they start having a little cash and things like that, and they'll have years where everything is just going well, and then all of a sudden you'll hear about the fact that they killed themselves, they committed suicide. Or you'll hear about marriages lasting. I look at a person like as big as Jeff Bezos, who has all the money in the world. He has anything that life can offer him. Been married 25 plus years, and then you hear him getting a divorce from his wife after so many years. It's things that have been, and I can't speak for him or anyone, but I realized that one human common thread that weaves us all together is that we have all been through some stuff. And if you want to make your life less surprising and more predictable, then you have to unpack what is it? And you got to do this on a regular basis, an inventory. Like what I love about my husband, Nikki, is that from time to time, he asks me, he's like, Chantel, how am I doing as a husband? Like, what is it that you need from me? Or am I doing this right? And I think that that's like the sexiest thing that he can do. And not just because I love it, but the fact that he is willing to be that humble to say, okay, I know I'm not doing everything right. So let me just check in to see what's happening so that I can course correct. And we have to do that personal introspection on our own so that we can live a life that is not just glamorous on Facebook, but a life that is meaningful and has an impact on people that we love and people who are around us who will be there when the cameras shut off.
Yes.
You know?
Exactly.
And so, you know, I love what Sunday's like, amen. Yes, amen. Rachel's like, she believed that some men love their women, but love themselves more. So that whole narcissism is could have probably contributed. But tell us about what you mentioned, what Twileen mentioned, those empty promises. When did it come to a head, that fateful day?
Okay, so I mentioned how we had that peaceful period. One thing I will say is that after a certain point of being hurt so many times, I felt like I was unable to um, exhibit the love that a wife should have for her husband. And so I really felt like, each time, let's say we first get together, the love meter is up here. But each time you hurt me, the love meter gets lower and lower. So I'm loving you at the best of my ability, but now that level is here. Whereas had you not hurt me that many times, it would have been way up there. And so throughout the marriage, although we had those times where I was at peace, we weren't having any instances where we were having issues. I still was unable to get back to that level of love that I needed to have. And so I wasn't necessarily happy. It was peaceful, but I wasn't happy. And so I would pray. I would pray to God all the time and ask him to help me get that love back, help me get that, that love and affection I wanted to have for my husband. I'm in a relationship, this is supposed to be for life. I want my heart to be in it. And so I would pray and ask God, a lot about that. And then finally I started shifting and I started praying and asking God to just reveal to me one way or the other, is this now I'm asking God to tell me if this is my husband after I didn't already married him. And so now I'm praying.
And how many years was that?
Yeah. So
how many years had passed since?
Oh, this was probably at least 10 years in. This is 10 years in where I'm really questioning, because I'm really I had a lot of stuff going on inside where I didn't know. I just didn't know. I knew that I loved him, but I also knew that I didn't love him the way I should love him.
Right.
So I asked God, listen, one way or the other, please just reveal to me, what this relationship is supposed to be, if he's really supposed to be my husband. If not, then just let me know one way or the other. So that's what my prayer transitioned to after a while. And so, nothing happened for a while. And then eventually the fateful day came where, and this was unexpected out of nowhere, where I got a message and I found out that 2 years prior to that, this time, he had another infidelity. And not just another infidelity, but an infidelity that was, in my opinion, unforgivable because it was with someone who we both knew. And so I, it was so just crazy to me that I didn't even believe it at first. Like when I got the message, I didn't even believe it because it was just that crazy. And I just, you just you're in shock. You can't believe it. So when I first heard it, I sort of laughed it off. Like, this obviously can't be true, So after, things progressed and I realized that this message that I received was in fact true, that's when it started to sink in. And that's when everything started to just come crashing in for me. And yeah, and I have to say that it was an experience that I'd never experienced before. Um, Although I had been in this relationship where, he had messed up several times before and he passed. But this time was different. This time was different because I knew without a doubt that I had already prayed and asked God to show me. I also knew without a doubt that my husband at the time knew better. Like,
Hmm.
at this point, you know what the consequences are to your actions.
Okay.
So when you are making certain choices, there's no decision for me to even make because you made the decision for us. And
Hmm.
so the marriage was over, and I knew it. But the funny thing was that I had this peace. I had peace with my decision. I didn't have to go back and forth, and I didn't have to think on it. I didn't even have to really pray on it because I knew I'd already been praying. I knew that God was giving me the out. And so I felt at peace. I felt at peace.
So was this the moment that you walked away, or was this the moment where you felt peace, but you decided to bring him back again?
Nope, this was the moment I walked away. This was that moment.
So, so now this is powerful, y'all. I want you to realize this, is that Nikki, in the beginning, she said that she had the opportunity to ask God if this was the man for her. And she refused to do it, even though in her belly, she was like, oh my goodness, I know he's not, but I really want him to be. So I'm not even going to have that conversation with God because I already know what he's going to tell me. And I don't want to hear that. I don't want that confirmation. So for 10 years, she married this guy and she was in a relationship with him. And even while the abuse is happening and things are going on, she's still committed to the relationship. It wasn't until the final straw of the infidelity that she decided to walk away. Now, the reason why I highlight that is because sometimes what we want in life will not be what God wants us to have. And we have to be okay with saying, Lord, not my will, but your will be done. We have to be okay with saying, okay, that is exactly how I wanted to get that job, but I know it's going to cost me my reputation. I know it's going to cause me, it's going to cause my family grief. This is the guy who I do want to marry, but everything's telling me not to marry him. You have to be okay with that still small voice that you're hearing on the inside.
Mhm.
And even if in your case, Nikki, you weren't obedient, God will still show up. And he'll still try to tell you over and over and over again, get out. Don't do it. Go the other way. And I know there were many moments in your life, Nikki, where you experienced that voice. One in particular is when he almost took your life. Tell us about that.
So that was actually not my marriage. That was the relationship prior to with my son's father.
Your son's
Yeah.
father.
Yeah. So my son's father, that was the most traumatizing relationship. I almost died in that relationship. I There was a situation, and this is my girl Michelle Hardy has a show called Proof, right? And it's about proof that God exists. And so when she asked me about doing the show, and you bring up your personal testimony of proof that God exists, right? So my personal testimony that immediately came to mind was when I almost died at the hands of my son's father. And to make a long story short, he basically had a moment where he had, temporarily lost it, and he started choking me. And he was choking me so hard and for so long that I knew that I was going to die. I knew that if I didn't figure something out, that I was going to die. I was already trying to get his hands off, but he was too strong. So that wasn't working. He was almost lifting me up off of my feet. So I could barely even have my feet on the ground. And so I sort of just tried to calm myself, and I said to myself, you have to figure something out. And so what I did was I played dead. I decided, let me just act like, he's choked the life out of me so that he'll stop choking the life out of me, basically. And so I just went limp and I allowed my whole body to go limp and fall out on the ground. And
Wow.
when I did that, he immediately stopped choking me. And now he's standing over me and he's like, "Oh, are you okay? Wake up, wake up." So,
So
you
you're conscious, like you're watching him, your eyes are open, but you're
no,
playing.
I closed my eyes. I completely played as if I passed out. I closed my eyes, my body went limp, and I fell to the ground. And so I could hear him, but I couldn't see him. As I hit the ground, I purposefully took a deep breath, as big as I could, like so that when I hit the ground, I could still, mimic not breathing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one of the most traumatizing experiences of my life. He was immediately apologetic, which that in itself was just, you know, something that I just was so annoyed about because had you
Yeah.
really killed me, you would have been sorry about it, but you weren't sorry enough to stop doing it when I'm trying to get you to stop. And so you don't even have control over yourself. So that relationship, I knew I probably wouldn't have survived without God.
Hmm.
So that relationship there is what um God showed up and God showed out. God has showed up in all my relationships. I mention it in my book as well that in every relationship, all of my bad, toxic relationships that I was in, the stuff that I went through, I always knew that I was going through it, not just for me. I knew it. I knew I was going to um, share my story with other women or share my story with someone to be able to help someone else. So even when I was going through those, going through the abuse, going through the infidelities, going through this and that, um, I knew that I was going to use my experiences to hopefully share and help somebody else. And so God, He released me from that relationship. He released me from relationships after that, and then finally, my marriage, he released me from that relationship as well.
So tell us about this idea of being released. Now you are um, amazing. You're an author, and you've been released to do what God put you on the earth to do, and that's to empower women. Um, to love themselves. I love the name of your movement. You could share a little bit about that with us, and how folks can get in touch with you after the conversation, because the conversation continues. One thing about Girl Share Your Story is about us self-identifying. And if there's a woman on here that's a guest of my show that you can relate to, that you want to connect with, who can help you along your journey, by all means, reach out. So, Nikki, tell them how they can get in touch with you and also what you're doing to empower women around the world.
Absolutely. So, what I'll say is after I was released from my marriage, that is when I really learned to sort of level up, and that's when I started getting back into the Word and learning to grow, and just learning to be a better me. And so in that process, I finally figured out how to love myself correctly and love myself enough. And it was such an exciting thing. It's so invigorating to finally get to that place to where I literally felt like I was glowing. Like I literally felt the glow. And so, and people probably think I'm crazy. And my favorite movie does happen to be The Last Dragon, where he glows. But listen, I honestly felt a glow once I reached that point. And so I've been very excited and very happy to just share it, and I felt compelled to let other women know that, hey, listen, when you let go of toxic relationships, when you let go of those things, you too can get to this level. You have once you let go and learn to love yourself, learn to love yourself enough, that's when you get the glow. Okay? So, what I did was I started a Facebook group called Sis Love Yourself. It's a group that's for women only, and where we support each other, we love on each other. The group is basically, I wanted it to feel like a big hug. Like you come in that group and you just get a big hug from your sisters. We all been through so many different things. We can relate to so many different things. We can help each other out. There's no reason for us to um, be pitted against one another. We as women, we got to learn to love and empower one another, because we
Yeah.
all walk in the same shoes at one point or another. And so my Facebook group is called Sis Love Yourself. And that's we do question of the days, where we do checkups, and we figure out, make sure that we are good, mentally and in our health and everything. And then yes, I did write a book as well, and my book is called Bittersweet Lessons. um, it is basically a memoir which details all of those relationship trials, tribulations, ups and downs, and that roller coaster ride that I talked about a little bit earlier. And so the book is available for pre-sale right now. It will be out at the end of the month, but it's available for pre-sale on my website, which is sheisnickynicole.com. Again, that's sheisnickynicole.com. And so that was a very freeing experience in itself, because I always knew that God was going to use me in some way, and use my story, and use my experiences and my testimony. So writing that book was just me pouring my entire heart and soul out, with the intention and the hope that it would help somebody else. If it just helps one person, that's what it was intended to do. So I pray that it
Love
gets in
that.
the hands of the right woman, so that it can be a blessing to those who need it at the time. My main message is love yourself enough. Loving yourself enough is imperative. Yes, we all love ourselves, but are we loving ourselves enough? And
Mm.
you get to that place where you're loving yourself enough, that's when things begin to change. And that's when, you're not experiencing some of those other things that you were experiencing before, because now you're showing other people how to love you.
Love that. I absolutely love that. And I love you. I love you just for being brave, being courageous, being selfless. Sometimes that we just want to keep it to ourselves because we're too afraid of what people may think of us. And the fact that you're willing to just say, I didn't go through this because it's just for me, it's for other people. And I applaud you, sister. And I'm so thankful that you were able to join us today. And y'all, go ahead and join the Facebook group. It's free right now, but maybe there will be a fee later. So get it while it's free and just be a part of that community. Sometimes you don't hear thank you enough. Sometimes you don't hear I love you enough.
Yeah.
Sometimes we don't hear a reminder to tell us to love ourselves more. And that's what that community is all about. And Nikki Nicole is your guide and also your cheerleader to help you along your journey. And we all need some help. I need help. I need help. So go get the help you need. And remember that it is important to share your story. So I want you to find out how you can turn your story into a book. Go ahead to www.girlshareyourstory.com. And I look forward to seeing you on our next show. Take care. Bye-bye.